This is George Galloway for كلمة on Al-Mayadeen Television, coming to you from London. Coming to you from London. I'm George Galloway, presenting كلمة where every word is free. Welcome to كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Al-Mayadeen Television, coming to you from London, but discussing Libya, which is a faraway country of which the British now know all too much, because, of course, the human wreckage of the events in Libya over the last few years are beginning to wash up on the shores of the Mediterranean, or be fished out of the sea, saved or not from drowning by the combined naval power of the very European countries which laid Libya to waste in the NATO bombardment and destruction of the country. So, although a foreign policy question for the British, it's very much becoming a domestic question, because the boat people who are sailing out of Libya are not going to be stopped by any measures against people traffickers. They are a human wave, coming not, of course, just from Libya, but through the portals of Libya, which is now a non-existent, failed state. In fact, there are many Libyas now, and there probably will never be a single Libya again. All these different Libyas have their own allegiances, some of them to ISIS. They have declared in Sirte that they are now a part of the Islamic Caliphate and giving their loyalty and allegiance to the Caliph himself, the self-appointed Caliph Baghdadi. And so the destruction of the Libyan state has, as so many other Western foreign policy adventures, become a giant boomerang. It's brought a problem to the shores of the European Union that was entirely of the European Union's own making. That's as good a political definition of a boomerang as I can come up with. Now, let me be candid. I never met Gaddafi. I never met any of his family. I had no relations with the Libyan regime of Gaddafi. I didn't support it. I was glad when it was overthrown. But it takes a particular genius to actually make Libya worse now than it was when Gaddafi was running it. I don't doubt that there are people with reasons to be grateful to Gaddafi. After all, the small population of Libya did enjoy a bonanza of oil revenues of hundreds, maybe thousands of billions of dollars. And with that small population, everyone should have been a multi-millionaire. And of course, everybody knows that that is simply not true. Most Libyans were not multi-millionaires. And Libya, especially if you went off the back, into the back streets off the main highways, didn't look like Dubai or Abu Dhabi. There was monumental mismanagement, corruption, and all kind of malfeasance, including violence, including involvement in terrorist activities in various places under Gaddafi. All the more reason then to pay attention when I say that Libya today is much, much worse than it was under the dictatorship. And it goes to show, at least for me, though there will be some who will disagree, that you cannot change regimes from the air by bombardment from the former colonial powers and expect anything good to come of it. It seems that no one had in mind that the people they had been treating as Al-Qaeda, delivering them to Gaddafi to be tortured just a few short years before, when they came to power, would act like, well, Al-Qaeda, and that they would splinter into one after the other of rival, fanatic, extremist militias. It doesn't seem to have occurred to anyone who may well have thought that a greater share of the profits in the business might be theirs, that actually it would produce a Libya or several Libyas in which there's no business or profit at all. Anyone who says that they did this to Libya to make money, well, if they did, they were idiots, because they're not making money. Because Libya has simply never recovered from the NATO bombardment. Indeed, it has gone back 100 years. And I predict that there will never be a single Libyan state again. There will be warring emirates in Libya. And unless we're very lucky, the instability and madness that has been unleashed in Libya will start to creep along the North African coast. And the Arab Maghreb may become to look rather like the Levant in terms of its warring, destructive spiral. That's what we're discussing tonight with an audience of experts. Some of them disagree with me about this. Let's take you first, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, George. My name's Aqib. David Cameron was very eager to parade around in Tripoli after the collapse of the Gaddafi regime.
He wouldn't be there now.
Yeah, and he was very... he betrayed his intentions even then when he said that Britain and France should get first dibs on the oil. What sort of, in spite of the abhorrent refugee crisis that's going on in the Mediterranean, what sort of effects will this have now on the oil interests and the British businesses that urged him to go in there as well at that time and destroy what was,
well, first of all, I don't understand their mentality, because they were already doing business with Gaddafi. Gaddafi had oil, he didn't want to eat it, he wanted to sell it. Yeah. He built up a phenomenal sovereign wealth fund, which has almost all now been lost in the financial crash by the very bankers who ruined the rest of our economies. They've also ruined Libya's economy. That's the parts of it that weren't stolen. Just the parts of it that were lost by the reckless gamblers who were playing with it. Gaddafi had already given them everything that they wanted. He had been a rogue, a rebel, a so-called revolutionary leader. But by the time he was lynched in the streets in the most gruesome possible fashion, he was already playing ball with the international system. He destroyed what he said was a nascent weapons of mass destruction program. He settled at the cost of billions for the crime of Lockerbie, which he had long denied Libya's involvement in. He began to develop the concept of Isratin as a solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. He gave over the names and addresses of every revolutionary he'd ever helped. So he was playing ball, and bringing him in Tony Blair was a big friend of Gaddafi. Saif al-Islam Gaddafi was a big friend of Tony Blair. And Saif al-Islam now claims that Tony Blair was working for the Sovereign Wealth Fund or some other aspect of Libya's affairs, whether true or not, I don't know. So I don't understand why they would need to destroy Libya in order to make money, because they were already making lots of money. And paradoxically, as I say, having destroyed it, they're now not making any money, because there's no normal business. David Cameron couldn't go to Tripoli because he'd be murdered within 5 minutes. He wouldn't get out the airport.
It's true. Yeah, on the money issue, do you think there's a line of thinking of all these people who are getting removed? They all have something in common. Like, for example, Saddam Hussein, for all his shortcomings, he was under sanctions for a long time with the UN Oil for Food program, and he was sitting on top of a vast mountain of wealth in Iraq of oil, and he couldn't use that. And he was of the mind of using different currencies other than dollars to sell his oil. Similarly with Gaddafi as well, he always talked about a gold standard or using a gold currency or a gold-backed currency. And similarly, we've got Vladimir Putin in Russia and the Chinese government as well in following the 2008 crash. They've been advising the G20 to move towards a gold-backed currency instead of the US dollar because they think it's worthless, which in reality it is. It's just, because they say it's so powerful, that's why it's so powerful. But they're trying to remove all these people from the international stage, and also the ones that they can't remove, they're putting extreme pressure on them, like Russia.
Well, I'm not going to disrespect that theory. I hear it a lot. I'm not persuaded by it. I'm not persuaded that Saddam Hussein was going to price oil in the long term other than in dollars. I'm not persuaded that Gaddafi had the real intention, let alone the competence and capability of mounting an alternative currency. I'm not persuaded that gold-backed currency is the answer in any case, though I understand that a lot of people are attracted to it. And I really am at a loss, not much good as I'm the presenter of the program. This is one on which I genuinely don't understand what the other side have done. Normally I'm against what the other side have done, but I know why they did it. In this case, and in the Syrian case, I really don't understand what the game is. I cannot understand who profits from destroying Syria and putting ISIS in control of Damascus, next door to, well, potentially the Zionists, but not for long. If I was an Israeli, I wouldn't depend on the crowd of heart-eating fanatics that have assembled now in Syria remaining peaceful vis-a-vis me. I wouldn't. I think that this is a monster that's out of control. So in the Libyan case, I don't know why they did it. I know why they didn't do it. I know that they didn't do it for democracy, because all of their friends in the Middle East are tyrants, and the biggest tyrants are their best friends. I know they didn't do it because of one family rule, because they love one family rule, even families that call their country after their family. At least Gaddafi didn't rename Libya Gaddafia. The reasons, as stated, are false reasons. They didn't do it because Gaddafi was moving his toy town army towards Benghazi. First of all, they knew the elements that were in Benghazi, the very elements that ended up murdering the American ambassador and anyone else they could get their hands on. They didn't do it because they feared loss of life in Benghazi. They have been watching loss of life on a gargantuan scale in the Middle East without lifting a finger to stop it. So why did they do it in Libya? I'm hoping that in the course of this show we might get closer to the truth. Who's next? Well, let's hear from our Libyan friend. Go ahead.
My name is Sabri Malik. I'm the official spokesperson of the Democratic Party in Libya. I'd like to address the issue of the illegal immigrants, the Africans, mainly Africans, who are trying to get to the shores of Europe. This problem is a European problem, but it is also a Libyan problem. They are causing us a lot of pain in Libya. There are virtually hundreds of thousands of them coming from sub-Saharan countries to Libya in the hope to get through the Mediterranean, across the Mediterranean to Europe. The European Union is not helping in any way. They are trying to prevent them from reaching Europe, but they are not giving any help to Libya. The United Nations is not helping either. Libya has a lot of problems nowadays. We have a war, almost a civil war going on. And we are not expected to deal with this flood of people. What can we do to them? So the government in Tripoli...
Which government?
In Tripoli.
You have many governments, of course.
I'm talking about the one in Tripoli.
But that's not actually the government of Libya.
Could you please let me finish?
No, this is a dialogue.
I don't want to stray,
I'm in charge of it.
I don't want to stray away from my subject.
No,
then
I'll give you as long as you like.
Okay.
But you are speaking quite long compared to the other guests, and I'm entitled to punctuate your long statement with appropriate questions. And my question is this: which Libya, which government is the international community supposed to help? Because as you very well know, even though you live here in London, there are many governments in Libya.
No, there aren't many governments in Libya. There is the government which we in the Democratic Party recognize, which is in Tripoli, in charge of the capital and most of Libya. And there is another one in Tobruk, which is in the hands of the Egyptian intelligence. This is why we don't consider it to be a Libyan government. Anyway, going back to our story, we in Libya, the government in Libya, in Tripoli, supports any effort to destroy the boats which carry the illegal immigrants to Europe. We don't mind a military action. We see it as the only way to stop this flood of people. Most of them die in the sea anyway before making it to Europe.
So let's kill them.
No, destroying the boats, not the people. Before people board on the boats, they are in Libyan waters, and the American drones can destroy them. We also need the help to stop these immigrants coming to Libya in the first place.
But isn't the problem, sir, that there is no state in Libya, there is no state power, there is no control of the borders, and therefore no one can stop these refugees arriving in Libya? And that's because of the war that you supported. That's because of the war that you thanked Britain and the United States and NATO for unleashing on your own country.
We're very much thankful to NATO for helping us getting rid of the tyrant Gaddafi. Gaddafi destroyed Libya. He was a monster, and without the NATO help, Libya would be like Syria nowadays. The Syrians couldn't remove...
It is like Syria nowadays.
No, it isn't. No, you're exaggerating, sir. Libya is not like Syria. Libya is having counter-revolution problems. So the revolution will take time. Everybody knows that it's very difficult to go from dictatorship to democracy overnight. We are having teething problems, if you like. But we'll get through. Libya is not like Syria. Libya... we are trying to establish our democracy, and we need the help of the West instead of people putting us down.
Now, who else? Yes, madam.
Thank you for having me. My name is Saba Georgis. I am an Eritrean British. I would like to say thank you to you, Mr. Galloway. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge and to tell the audience that you came to Eritrea in the 1980s, and you were one of the few Westerns who highlighted our armed struggle for liberation, and the Eritrean people are grateful for that. I hope you visit Eritrea and see what's happening.
More than 30 years ago.
Thank you. With regards to migration, it's something that's close to my heart, of course. A lot of Eritreans are coming to Europe through Libya. The gentleman talked about Libya being unable to cope with it, needing Western support. I would very much oppose his views. Actually, people are escaping from the Horn of Africa and from other African countries because of the neoliberal ravaged economies, because of the manufactured poverty, the crushing poverty that they have had to endure for decades, maybe hundreds of years. This is not a divine poverty, it's a manufactured poverty. And talking about Eritrea in the Horn of Africa, there is a kind of latent conflict between Ethiopia and Eritrea, a border conflict that was manufactured again by the same powers. This border conflict was resolved. Both countries went to arbitration, and the arbitration court gave the flashdown point to Eritrea, and it was legally settled, and they were supposed to implement it because it was a binding agreement. Ethiopia refused to respect it. It still occupies Eritrea's sovereign territory. It's got about 300,000 armies there. But the guarantors, the EU, the US, the UN, and the African Union, a toothless organization, you may say, but these were the guarantors of the agreement. They were supposed to impose sanctions on the party that refused to honor the decision. Ethiopia is in violation of international law, and it's doing so under the nodding approval of the US administration and EU, especially Britain and France. Now, if Ethiopia were compelled to leave Eritrea, we would have a peaceful Horn of Africa, a truly synergistic relationship between the governments, and the area is rich enough to grow economically, and people wouldn't migrate to begin with from their countries. So they're leaving their countries because of economic reasons, and not even political reasons in the case of Eritrea. Because Eritrea now is being sanctioned as well by the UN Security Council under the auspice of US. The sanctions have no base. Even the body that they put in place to oversee, to investigate the reasons for the sanctions has come up with no justification for them, but they're still in place, creating havoc on the economy of Eritrea. Now, this creates an economic stagnation from which people would want to escape. It's natural. You know, people from Western Europe, from countries like Spain, are migrating to other Western Europe countries because economies, that's what human beings do. They move from place to place when economies fail. So the root cause is not understood. I mean, the debate in regards to migration here in the UK is so skewed, it's so devoid of context and history that people have a completely unrealistic understanding of it. And so they see these people coming through boats. They're Africans, they're migrants, they're after our jobs, they're going to do this and do that, and we have to stop them, and all sorts of madness. Actually, the root cause needs to be understood, and something needs to be done about that. Instead of the powerful countries holding the region, the Horn of Africa, where I come from, hostage of a no peace, no war situation by propping up dictators. Ethiopia and Djibouti, for example, are satellite states which are providing a lot of stuff for the US. I mean, Djibouti is essentially a colony of French, as you know, George. So we have really dictators who are working against the best interest of their region, turning the whole region into a region that's riddled with havoc. And that's what's happening. That needs to be understood.
Well, I think a lot more people will understand it after your contribution than did before you spoke. That's as good a contribution as has ever been made on this show, Kalima Hurra. I've been in this issue for so long that I remember that the current pro-Western US satellite state in Ethiopia, its governor, its party, its ruling party, when I first knew them, were pro-Albanian Maoists. The Tigray People's Liberation Front used to send me Christmas cards adorned by Chairman Mao Zedong's portrait. Now they are American puppets and are used in the region. So if you stand by the banks of the river for long enough, you see many things float by. But the people who are floating by in the Mediterranean are real people. And making drone attacks on their boats is certainly not going to solve this problem. As you rightly say, this problem is rooted in the context of war and exploitation and occupation throughout, in this case, Africa, but there are many other cases. The Rohingya people, for example, are pouring in their thousands into the holds of ships and dying a watery death, being driven by violence, anti-Muslim violence, out of Burma, for example, with Burma declaring that they are nothing to do with them and sending them out to sea where no one else will take them, and there they perish, other than those just found in a mass grave in Malaysia. So the imperial footprint and the interference of the powers in all of these theaters is very clear to see. I'll be right back after this. You're watching كلمة حرة with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming to you from London, discussing Libya and all matters attendant. We took the camera out onto the streets of London to hear what the people said. Watch this.
شعب عربي واحد مسلم واحد، لكن الثقافات والتركيبة الجغرافية مختلفة تماما.
There are many refugees in the Middle East, whether it's Syria, Libya, Yemen. I mean, it's very bad.
يعني شو تهدم بيوت وتكسف منازل، دي مش حل خالص. يعني
كل الوطن العربي حاليا عم يمر بأزمة.
أنا من سكان طرابلس. الأمان ما فيش، في مشاكل، في ناس من جماعة داعش يعني خاشين لليبيا، في قتل.
في كتير قوى إقليمية لها مصلحة إنه الوطن العربي ما يتطور.
حضرتها واحد هارب من بلده يعيش حياة كريمة، عايز حرية.
أي عربي يذهب لأوروبا مفتوح له لا حاجة لكل الشعوب، لأنه في ظلم.
الاتحاد الأوروبي عم يبذل جهود إنه يمنع قدوم اللاجئين اللي بيسموهم غير شرعيين إلى ضفاف الاتحاد الأوروبي، وهذا حق طبيعي لهم إنهم يحاولوا يحموا حدودهم، لكن بنفس الوقت الاتحاد الأوروبي بيعرف إنه هدول الناس هربانين من موت.
أزمة كبيرة موجودة في ليبيا بسبب وجود الخلل الأمني والتدخلات الموجودة من الخارج في هذه الدولة.
الآخرين عندهم أجندتهم، لهم مصالحهم، لهم أهدافهم.
وهلأ هالظروف الصعبة حتوحدنا، حيصير انتمائنا للأمة العربية أكثر ما يكون انتمائنا للي برا، هذا كل أملنا.
Very interesting indeed. Let's hear from those experts. Young gentleman there in the middle of the row. Go ahead, sir.
I'm unsure about whether this perception still exists, but it certainly was part of the casus belli for the intervention in Libya, that the people of Libya were living under a tyrant, namely Muammar Gaddafi, whom they had been backing. He was the mad dog of the Middle East 1 minute, and the next minute he was their friend. He even hugged Tony Blair in a tent.
Kissed, I think.
Kissed and
more
hugged.
More than a hug.
Yeah, probably did something else behind the scenes as well. But they embraced certainly in the deserts of Libya 1 minute, and then it was being used as a pretext to invade Libya the next. And it was the same with Saddam. 1 minute Western powers were selling him guns and gas, and as you say, maps, the better to target them. And the next minute they were using his deeds that he committed with those munitions as an excuse or even a pretext to invade his country. And this notion that the Western powers or the neocons support democracy is an absolutely false one. If we look, from the very beginning, the fact that the Middle East was created in a way to divide people and, sliced and diced into different countries and lands, and potentates picked from a circle to represent one country or the other, and from different sectarian groups, the better to divide and rule the population. And then Mossadegh in 1953, when he was overthrown, when he tried to retake the wealth of the Iranian people for themselves, he was overthrown as well. The Bahraini royal family have been there for God knows how many years. The Kuwaiti royal family, when Saddam invaded the country, the first place they ran to was London. And in Saudi Arabia today, all across the Middle East, even with Sisi in Egypt at the moment, it's just completely ridiculous to even put forward the liberation of people from tyranny as a pretext to invade a country. So I'm like you, confused. I mean, what was the real reason for their invasion of Libya?
I was hoping at the end of that very erudite contribution you were going to tell me, because I don't actually know. At least in the case of Iraq and Saddam Hussein, they waited long enough for the existence of a public opinion that didn't actually know about their role in the past, didn't know that the British, American, German, and other countries had actually supplied the very things that we were now being asked to invade Iraq in order to disarm. But in the case of Libya, they didn't wait. In the case of Libya, they were the British security services, the head of the British security services, was sending a letter to Gaddafi's chief intelligence gun, boasting that we had just delivered a Christmas present to you. That Christmas present was a man and his pregnant wife, illegally kidnapped and sent back to Libya to be tortured.
Was that Abdul Hakim Belhaj?
It was. Abdul Hakim Belhaj, now the leader of one of the militias that are competing for control in Libya. Now, Mr. Belhaj has sued the British government. He's been offered millions of pounds to drop the case, but he doesn't want money. He has no need of money. He wants an acknowledgement of what the British government did to him and £1 in damages, though he has turned down £2.7 million already. This is the depth of the cynicism of the British government's position. That only yesterday, metaphorically speaking, we were hunting down the very freedom fighters that we then backed in order to overthrow Gaddafi. And I have no idea why. Just as I have no idea why the West is backing Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria. You're right. We backed Gaddafi. We helped him torture his opponents. He bought our stuff. He invested his country's money here. He sent his children here to be educated at our finest universities with the assistance of the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, on House of Commons notepaper. You really couldn't make this stuff up.
His son, he bought a university campus at the LSE or something. It was even named after him.
Well, the LSE, one of the most famous universities in the world, the London School of Economics, became known, briefly I hope, as the Libyan School of Economics, because Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi went there, was given a doctorate. I'm not sure of the quality of his dissertation, but let's call him by his title, Dr. Saif al-Islam, who then gave a huge sum of money to the Libyan school, the London School of Economics. Now, that's about as corrupt a nexus as it's possible to imagine. And then when the next day, more or less, you say we have to invade this country, we have to destroy it because it's ruled by tyrants, the very tyrants that we've been supping with just yesterday. It beats me. You're a clever young man. I'm looking for the answers from you. Who's next? Who would like to? Yes, the lady at the back.
Hi, George. My name is Rana, and I hope to give you the answer for that. What happened in 2000 was the victory of Hezbollah, who kicked the Zionists out of Lebanon. After that, all Arab leaders with the West, they started doing coalition to get rid of Hezbollah, to defeat them, and certainly Syria and Iran. Because they couldn't do so in 2006, and the people, the Arab people and the Muslim people around the world, they started to admire Hezbollah, admire this allies. So they wanted to cause chaos everywhere, and Condoleezza Rice said it is the constructive chaos. Yeah, and that's what they did. And with the help of the tyrant everywhere, they paid the money to buy the weapons from the West, to destroy our country, to make chaos everywhere, let us kill each other. So our countries are ripped everywhere, destruction, killing. We cannot describe it. It's awful. While the Zionists are sitting taking Palestine, taking Jerusalem, day by day. They're taking the land, they're taking the houses of the people there, they're killing them and imprisoning them. Also, the resources in every country that they are now in conflict, the West is taking them. And also the Zionists. In Iraq, the places where ISIS are taking control, they're selling them to Zionists. Probably in Libya the same. And in terms of the refugees, they're not coming just from Africa. They're also coming from the Syrian refugees who took shelter in Egypt, and also people trapped in Gaza. They're fleeing there. They're selling everything just to get out of Gaza. So the solution wouldn't be to bomb these ships. If you don't want people to come to your country, you don't go and invade this country. You don't go and cause chaos in this country. If all the people of all the world is living in peace and everyone is keeping their matter to themselves, this chaos wouldn't happen. But the greediness of the West, the greediness of the Arab dictators, it's causing all this problem, and all for the purpose to help the Zionists to control the Middle East and do the state of Israel from the Euphrates to Nile.
From the Euphrates to the Nile. Well, it's a very challenging analysis. Much of it I agree with, some of it I don't. But constructive chaos was indeed the neocon plan. I don't know how they imagined the constructive part would work, but the chaos has definitely worked. The world is in chaos, and the Middle East region, one of the most significant geopolitical, economic, central areas of the globe and international affairs, is in a state of total chaos. And there's no doubt that the Zionists are acting upon this. There is no doubt that the colonial powers are acting on this, but so are the Arabs themselves. I saw an article reported yesterday, written in the theoretical journal of ISIS, in which one of the women leading ISIS figures was arguing that the taking of Yazidi girls and the multiple rape of those girls was Islamic, and to condemn it was to invite takfir, that anyone who condemned this brutal, inhuman act, of which there have been thousands of examples, was themselves kuffar, had expelled themselves from Islam by condemning it. Now, how such a mentality could command the support of apparently tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of Muslims is beyond me. Now, the refugees are fleeing from this chaos. They're fleeing from the war. They're fleeing from the manufactured poverty, as it was described by the young Eritrean woman earlier. They are fleeing from the injustice of a world in which some have everything and others, many, many others, have nothing at all. Yemen is a very good case in point. Yemen is the poorest country in the Arab world, one of the poorest countries in the entire world, yet its next door neighbor, a fellow Arab, fellow Muslim country, is the richest country in the world. These things don't compute, and they can't last. I'll be right back after this. You're watching Kalima Hurra with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming to you from London. We are talking about Libya. How Libya, which was NATO's latest, I think it was latest, I'm losing count, disaster, has now washed up on our own shores. A tide of refugees. who may build into not tens, not even hundreds of thousands, but millions. If millions arrive in Libya, if millions take to the sea, there ain't enough drones to stop it. We took the camera out onto the streets of London to test the waters there. Let's watch.
بدخول الأجانب، تخليص البلد بيكون بأنه يستلموها الشباب أولاد البلد يحكموها.
ما لها حل يعني، ما لها حل إلا إذا كان حصل صلح بين الطرفين من قوات حفتر والقوات الثانية.
What is the result? You create power vacuums. I'm not saying autocratic regimes are good. They're not good. But you can't just say that these are democratic or solely democratic representatives that are just want freedom.
هو لو العرب ما دوروش على بعض يعني ووقفوا جنب بعض أوروبا مش هتوقف جنبنا.
لا أحبس الخروج الشعب الليبي من بلاده والعودة إلى أوطانهم تبقى مسألة صعبة جدا.
لما القذافي قرر يشن حرب على شعبه هو سمح للغرب انهم يفوتوا. قد يكون الغرب استغل هذا الشيء. احنا ما فينا نلوم الغرب على ذكائه، بنلوم نفسنا على غبائنا.
ما لهاش حل يعني إذا كان يستنى في بلده. بس هيستنى بلده دمار، يعني هيعمل ايه؟ ما فيش سبيل اللي يجي في البحر ويموت، يا اما يموت في البحر يا اما يموت في بلده، ما فيش حل تاني.
الليبي لا يحتاج كناحية اقتصادية أن يخرج خارج ليبيا، إنما يبحث عن الأمن.
أتمنى من القبائل الليبية تعود لرشدها وترى مستقبل ليبيا والشعب الليبي في الأولويات، لأنه حتى الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام قال لنا فهي نتنة القبيلة تجنبوها فلن تخدم أبدا.
يعني شغل التدخل في ليبيا صار دمار. أنا ما أقدر أكمل، بس كان تجيني الدمعة كنت أفكر باللي شغل الوطن العربي، شغل ليبيا، سوريا.
في الوقت الحالي ما طلبناش أي مساعدة. طلبنا مساعدة شيء واحد من الحكومة الليبية، إن توفر لنا الأمان، توفر الجيش، توفر الشرطة، توفر المصاريف للناس، تعطيهم معاشاتهم.
أتمنى حقيقة أنه الشعب الليبي يدرك تماما أهمية الأمن في هذا البلد، وأتمنى أن يكون هناك اصطفاف حكومي وشعبي للخروج من هذه الأزمة.
Well, there you are. That's the view of the populace in London. There are many people who know nothing of the context our Eritrean guest gave us earlier in the show. For them, it's just another variant of refugees, immigrants, them over there coming here, looking for our jobs, looking for our women, looking for our houses, and so on. They have no idea of the culpability our own countries have in the disaster that's now threatening us. Let's hear from more of the audience on this subject. Who would like to speak next? Young lady at the front.
I completely agree with what you just said. I think the media is partly to blame for that as well. We never told the media what exactly Britain did or the US did in order for Libya crisis to become what it is today. The only thing we're ever told is, oh, the refugees are coming to take our jobs, to attack our welfare system. And we're all high and mighty, and we don't actually do anything wrong. And that's what's brainwashing our generation and generations to come as well. What can we do to counteract that?
Well, I'm trying with every breath that God has given me to do that, but you're undoubtedly correct that the memory span, even of the journalists, at least I'm being kind to them and saying they've forgotten, maybe it's willful, even of the journalists who are covering this Libyan refugee crisis never refer to the fact that Britain and the United States and France bombed Libya back to the Stone Age and have destroyed the Libyan state. So there is no state to stop these refugees arriving. And in fact, droning the boats would leave all these refugees in Libya. I'm not sure how the competing factions in Libya would feel about that, especially as black people are most often found hanging from trees in today's Libya. It's free and democratic Libya.
But that's just it, though. They've made an object that we can openly go and say, people think, oh, let's just drone the boats. Why are we doing that? Because we don't consider them to be human beings?
Yes.
That's the way we've been conditioned.
That's a good point. When David Cameron and William Hague cancelled the rescue mission that Britain was contributing to try and fish people out of the Mediterranean before they drowned, only 33 members in the British Parliament opposed him, and I was one of those. So more than 600 members of Parliament assented to it. Another example of how these people don't even seem to grasp the mathematics of what it is that they're doing. They save a little bit of money by cancelling a rescue service, and they end up having to face, if you'll forgive the pun, a tidal wave of refugees coming their way, plus the opprobrium rightly attracted to their conduct. We have many examples of this short-term memory in the media and therefore in the public. But it ought not to be too difficult to say to people, we attacked Libya and destroyed it, and now Libya is not in a position to stop all these refugees getting on boats there. I would have thought even the dumbest individual in Britain can be persuaded of that. Yes, madam, did you want to come back in?
I'm afraid, George, the level of indoctrination has got fever pitch here, that people just ignore the elementary facts that contribute to these things. It is sad beyond belief. As an Eritrean, it breaks my heart. Eritreans are incredibly resilient, incredibly determined people to build their country. We have a national service that's gone beyond what was supposed to be because we have an occupation going on. We have an army ready to invade us. So the Eritrean government, for example, instead of being held hostage to this crisis, it has mobilized its human resources, its capacity to build the country. And I'm sure you don't hear about this, but there was so-called Millennium Development Goals that was designed by the UN. Eritrea is one of those countries who has met it. Despite the challenge it faces, it has nearly eliminated malaria, which is endemic in the sub-Saharan country. It has the illiteracy level among school kids is really low. It has increased primary access to children, immunization. It has reduced maternal mortality and child mortality, and it's building its infrastructure. It's doing wonders in terms of water preservation, for example. You will never hear these things in the Western media about Eritrea, because as far as the West is concerned, they have to create a perception among the public that this is a dictatorial regime, this is anti-democracy, and then they deploy the human rights agents, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, to do their dirty work. There is a revolving doors between the policymakers and these humanitarian organizations, and then they impose sanctions on you, and then they ignore international law in terms of the occupation of Ethiopia that I spoke about. All this will create crisis. People then leave for better life. But this is not going to be understood in here, and I'm frustrated because I don't know how to debunk the narrative, the false narrative that exists in here.
Well, you've done a great job of it tonight, I must say. Let's hear from the young gentleman beside you.
Yeah, I just wanted to concur with the lady and the earlier comment that was made. I mean, I know public awareness on many issues seems to be pretty low, but this is one area where it is especially so. And a case in point here is before the election, there was a daily politics hustings, as it were, of a foreign affairs spokesman of the 5 or 6 parties that were the major parties on that panel, and none of them seemed to know even when we had invaded or who was now in power. And this seems to mirror the state of affairs in this country, where we are embarking on an adventure, as we like to term it, here and there, and we're not we're not understanding that these things create human consequences, that there are people that are affected, people the same as you. And it's very easy, when people don't look like you, especially when they're black or brown and their blood is much cheaper, to let them drown or to die. And then we have columnists in our national newspapers calling them cockroaches, and people calling for their boats to be hunted down by gunships or whatever. It's completely outrageous, and it's ridiculous.
Gunships or starships, we had a call for them to be droned earlier. I think you're right. We are sailing into different waters here, but we need to, because race and racism and an absolute contempt for the poor is endemic in the British and other Western political and media circles. And there is no doubt that if a man drowns trying to rescue his dog off the coast of Brighton and he's a white man, this is a big story. But if thousands die in the Mediterranean, if they're black, if they're immigrants, it barely even reaches the consciousness, never mind retained in the consciousness, of the vast majority of people. And as I say, even the parliamentarians. Only 33 protested at David Cameron's scrapping of British participation of sending ships around the Mediterranean trying to stop people from being drowned. And it is this question that the blood of some people is more valuable than the blood of others. Go ahead.
This brings back to the early question. A part of me would think they would know this. I mean, they're expensively remunerated, they're expensively educated, and they're parliamentarians. Surely they should know these things, and that's why
I always say, Irfan, I've said it to you before, don't make the mistake of imagining that the people who rule us are James Bonds. They're more Austin Powers than James Bonds. They are idiots. There is no mistake that they will not make thrice, 4 times, 10 times. That's obvious. After the disaster of Iraq, they did the same in Libya. After the disaster in Libya, they're now very close to doing the same thing in Syria by one means or another. Einstein said the definition of madness was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. You will not get a different result. You'll get the same result, though compound, it will be a worse outcome than the one that you did before. Let's take someone from over this side of the hall. Yes, the chap at the back, and then our living guest.
Hi, George. My name is Hussein Ali. I'm from the Middlesex University Global South Solidarity Society. Thank you. I think some of the reasons that the Libya thing happened goes on Gaddafi's international policy as well, which was he was trying to unite Africa. He was making great efforts. He was funding the African satellite, the biggest funder of the African satellite, to give Africa control over its own media. He was trying to build one African bank. He was trying to do quite a lot, and he was also working very heavily at the end, especially with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, and they were building a connection there to try and unite the so-called Third World. I also wanted to point on the fact of the refugees and why I think not many refugees are being allowed in the country, either from Libya or Syria, is I think they're scared of what these people are going to say when they're in this country, who they're going to speak to, the sort of messages they're going to come out with. And like the sister said earlier, they want the people in ignorance of what's going on there. And I think that plays a big part.
Well, again, look, I don't disrespect the points that you made, but I don't buy them. You say at the end that Gaddafi was working with Hugo Chavez. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but he wasn't working as closely with Hugo Chavez as he was working with Tony Blair. You say that he wanted one African bank, but there is no one African bank. Gaddafi had billions, hundreds of billions, maybe trillions to spend. And he was either the worst shopper in the world or something else was very badly wrong.
But I think, the best health service in Africa and the best education service in Africa, I think that's quite good shopping, to be honest.
Well, I don't know about that statistic. I've heard it before. All I can tell you is that the health service in Libya was atrocious. And if that was the best in Africa, that tells us what the standards are like in Africa. In fact, I have seen with my own eyes people going to the offices of the state, although there was no state, and saying that they had such and such an illness, and the drawer would be opened and a large sum of money would be given to them, and they would fly off to be treated for that illness somewhere else. That's not a health service. Libyan students studied abroad in huge numbers. Why? Because there was no proper educational facilities at home for them to study in. That's not the best education service in Africa, and if it is, God help Africa. I realize that people want to romanticize Gaddafi because sometimes, on the principle that a stopped clock is right twice a day, he said some things that were more to our liking. But Gaddafi and his family, especially his family, were utterly, deeply corrupted people. And they betrayed everything they ever stood for. Don't romanticize these people, because they're a part of the reason why we're in this mess.
Can I just say one more?
Yeah, you can, but in the next half. I'll be right back. You're watching Kalima Hurra with me, George Galloway, for Al Mayadeen Television here in London, talking about Libya. I was on a bit of a rant just before the break. I better let the object or subject of that rant back in to answer. It's Kalima Hurra after all. Go ahead, sir.
I just wanted to say, I don't see it really as romanticising. It's just from what my family have told me. They might be wrong. Obviously, they've lived in Sudan, which is a really messed up country to compare it with, but they were very impressed when they lived in Libya with what they saw. As far as looking for answers, the only answer is to try and stabilise Libya. The only way that can be done is by both sides speaking together. I know that there's certain people in that country that would never speak to other people due to sectarianism and just warlords, basically. But I think that those who are serious about rebuilding Libya for the best of Libya need to start talking to each other to fight against those extremist elements and say, first of all, before we put our ideologies in the thing, let's just sort out what's going on, because it is practically a genocide at the moment, what's happening.
Okay, who better then to go to next but a Libyan? Go ahead, sir.
Hello again. I'd like to say that as a Libyan and as an Arab and a Muslim, in our part of the world, there is a lot of condemnation of the West. Like if all the problems that we have are of Western source. I'm not defending the West. The West made mistakes, indeed blunders, in our part of the world. But condemning the West is not the answer. The answer lies in dealing with our own indigenous problems. As I see it, our worst problem is that we mix religion and politics. This is a problem we've had for 14 centuries. We cannot have democracy in the Arab world while our political thought remains to be theocratic. Theocracy and democracy do not mix. We need to do our own homework. We need to liberate our political thought to start with. Then we can think of building democracy. And I expect that if we start putting our house in order, there will be many Westerners who will come to our help. We cannot continue like this any longer.
Okay, let's take this gentleman here.
أهلا أستاذ جورج، أنا حسين طالب كويتي. بغيت أعلق على نقطة قذافي وإجرامه. تفضلت وأتفق معك على إجرامه، وقلت بأن الوضع في ليبيا بعد القذافي هو أسوأ، صحيح، لكن مع هذا لم تبرئ القذافي وعائلته من إجرامه. ومقارنة للقذافي ودي أنتقل إلى العراق. يعني احنا كثيرا ما نشيد بمواقفك ونشكرك عليها، لكن في نفس الوقت نحب ننتقدك، وكلمة حرة is a good opportunity، فرصة جيدة عليها. فأحب أذكرك في مقابلة أو عفوا لقائك في صدام حسين في جانوري أتوقع 1994. أذكر أو شفت المقطع الفيديو اللي تشكره وتثنيه فيه على قوته وعلى شجاعته وكسره للحواجز. وأيضا في مقابلة أخرى على قناة إنجليزية تفضلت وذكرت بأن العراقيين كانوا مؤيدين لصدام، ومن كان خصم صدام هو الغرب، وفي نفس الوقت الآن تتفضل وتقول بأن صدام مدعوم من الغرب وأداة غربية كشفت مؤخرا وأزيلت يعني في الوقت المناسب. فأحب أسألك الآن، العراقيين الذين كانوا يؤيدون صدام حسين هل هم الدواعش وفلول الحزب البعث؟ إن كنت تقصد هذا فأنت محق. أما الشعب العراقي شفناه في 2003 فور سقوط صدام كيف خرج ضده، وخاصة أن صدام يعني لا يقل جرام عن القذافي، وأنت أتوقع أبخص في هذا الأمر. الكيماوي في الأكراد، حربه مع إيران، حربه على الكويت يعني بلدي في 1990. فأحب أسألك عن هالمقابلتين وعن أسبابها، وهل لا زلت عند الرأي نفسه؟
Okay, that's a very long question and we don't have a long time to answer it. So let me be succinct to the point of brutal. I didn't say thanks to Saddam Hussein. I said thanks to the people of Iraq for their courage, their strength and their indefatigability. And I did not know then in 1994 that the Iraqis would have to find so much courage, so much strength, so much indefatigability in the 20 years or more that have elapsed. Secondly, I did not say that Iraqis didn't hate Saddam. I said many Iraqis hated Saddam and many Iraqis did not. And if you want my honest opinion, there will be fewer who would hate him today than hated him 11 years ago. I think most Iraqis would like to turn the clock back to before Blair and Bush invaded, occupied and destroyed their country. I don't have a scientific basis for saying that, and it's just my anecdotal common sense view that if Iraq had not been invaded and destroyed by the British and Americans principally, there would be no ISIS in Iraq. There would be no ISIS in Syria. And that seems to me self-evident. Saddam Hussein was a tyrant. He was a more efficient tyrant, a more honest tyrant than Gaddafi. Iraq built something. That's why the West wanted to destroy it, because it had a science base, because it had a powerful military, because it was a threat to Saudi Arabia, a threat to Israel. That's why they wanted to destroy.
But he destroyed two countries, Iran and Kuwait.
Well, let's talk about Kuwait. As you tempt me, I was going to avoid the fact that you're a Kuwaiti, but as you tempt me, Kuwait does belong to Iraq. Kuwait was stolen from Iraq by British colonialism. Don't shake your head, because I know the man who was in the tent when the British resident, Sir Percy Cox, drew a map in the sand with a stick and said, this is Kuwait and this is Iraq. Kuwait was a wilayat of Iraq throughout the entirety of the Ottoman occupation of the area. Now, brother,
let's just suppose that you're right, but that doesn't mean that I will destroy a country.
I'll let you back in. It was the wrong thing to do to invade and occupy Kuwait, and I said so at the time. You can check it. It's on TV and it's in Parliament. But that doesn't invalidate the fact that every single Iraqi, left, right, center, Sunni, Shia, secular, every Iraqi believes that Kuwait was stolen from them by the British colonial system. And that's because it was. That's because it's true. So,
how about Iran?
Sorry?
How about the Gulf War, Iran, 8 years of destroying Iran? I mean, he's still a tyrant, so you don't agree with him, right? That's what I'm asking.
Well, again, you see, there's a saying in English, a little knowledge is dangerous. If you don't mind me saying, you are displaying a little knowledge. I was on Iran's side in the Iran-Iraq war. I believed that the invasion of Iran by Saddam Hussein was at the behest of the imperial powers, and that instead of invading and trying to destroy the Iranian Revolution, the Ba'ath Party in Iraq should have been allying with the Iranian Revolution to destroy feudalism and colonialism in the region. That's also a matter of record. You can check it, you can Google it, you can YouTube it. So it's important when you're making an attack on somebody that you get your facts right, because I don't forget any facts, as you're probably already now aware. The truth is, as I was saying about Gaddafi, all these dictators have helped to bring this disastrous day that we're now living in closer, including Saddam, including Bashar, including Gaddafi. All of these people, by their complete failure of their projects, have brought us to this pass. The Ba'ath Party wanted to unite all the Arabs. It couldn't even unite itself. Iraq and Syria were both ruled by the Ba'ath Party. If they had united even themselves, the Arabs would have had a country stretching from the Mediterranean to the Gulf, with all this oil and gas and people and land and civilization. Imagine if they had achieved that. When President Nasser wanted to unite the Arabs, who opposed him? The Baathists opposed him.
No Syria.
I'm sorry?
No Syria.
There was a united Arab Republic, very briefly, between Egypt and Syria. Who broke it? The Syrian Baathists broke it. So, in this alone, I agree with this gentleman from Libya. It's the only thing I agree with him on. This temptation to blame others, to sit and wait for Godot, smoking the shisha, blaming the others, this is going to lead us deeper and deeper into trouble.
Thank you.
La shukra ala wajib. Yes, madam. Last word, I think, to you.
I think we're talking about the solution. For me, if I can just mention why Eritrea is in trouble, I know I bring back the debate to Eritrea because I am Eritrean. Eritrea, you know, in the global order where everyone is supposed to be on the line of the Washington, London, Paris consensus, Eritrea represents an anomaly, a typical entity that needs to be punished. Why? Because it rejects aid and all its manifestations. It wants aid to be self-limiting, but that's not, we know the aid agenda, what the aid agenda is. It rejects militarism, like AFRICOM, for example. Eritrea and Zimbabwe at least are, I think, only two countries in Africa that haven't accepted AFRICOM. AFRICOM is the United States military command in Africa. It doesn't occupy any kind of military base, but it systematically incorporates itself into countries' military, becoming systemic presence without making itself noticed. It opposes neoliberalism with all its fanfare. It opposes the IMF strangulation of economies. It opposes the World Trade Organization that manufactures poverty, as I said, through its several policies. It wants to engage with countries on a bilateral, on a mutualistic basis. It wants to chart its own destiny, and that is a cardinal sin as far as the West is concerned. Now, the solution is very much what the Latin Americas are doing. You know, they have a very good synergistic relationship. So much so now the unthinkable is being contemplated in a sense. United States is talking about removing the embargo, the half a century old embargo on Russia. Whether it materializes or on Cuba, whether it materializes or not, it remains to be seen. But the very fact that it is being contemplated by itself shows you who really has been isolated in that part of the world. So I wish we can replicate that in the Horn of Africa with symbiotic governments working for the betterment of the people. I think in the end it's consciousness of people, education of people, understanding what the basic democratic rights are without the elections and democracy fanfare that comes from the West that really doesn't materialize to anything tangible. So we need to inform ourselves.
Well, it's clearly about time I made another visit to Eritrea. 30 years. So. 30 years is too long. Yes, madam.
I would like to say about the solution. It's first of all we have to unite, and to unite we have to see what make us say about each other. You are kafir and kill each other. So we pick the hadiths which contradict humanity, which are fake, and they say Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, said them. So if we eliminate these hadiths, and which are preached in Saudi Arabia and also, unfortunately, in Al-Azhar in Egypt, also some cleric here in London, Yasser al-Habib, who he's preaching hatred against other Muslims. So if we eliminate all these, we can unite, we can trust that the power comes from within us, and then we can say to the West, we don't want your help, and we can rebuild our countries. Unity is the solution.
I don't think we're going to get far in abolishing hadith or the teaching of them. These are big and religious questions. But your last point is absolutely correct. Unless the Muslims and the Arabs in particular, given we're on an Arab television station, can find unity between them, can see what's important and what's not important, or which is less important. As Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah put it, while we are killing each other over whether our hands are like this or like this, the others are cutting our arms off behind our backs. This is so obvious, a child could see it. I'm waiting for the mass of the Arabs to rise up against this spiral which is leading all of us to absolute disaster. This has been Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, for Al Mayadeen Television, coming from London. Thank you very much.